We create build servers and Terraform templates so that we can set up our production and build environments such that they're consistent. But how do we set up our development environment so it's consistent from machine to machine? Let's smash on that. Hi everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Asp.Net Monsters. In today's episode, I'm going to talk about this cool new feature in VS Code called DevContainers. All right, so my scenario here is that I'm working on a bunch of different projects at the moment and in a bunch of different technologies, and it is a pain to remember to set up my environment properly for each individual one. Plus, if there's other developers working on it, it's nice to have a consistent environment so that everybody can develop in the same way on these projects. Now, many years ago, I interviewed at a company where their policy was that everybody had to use the same tools, same desktop resolution, same mice, same keyboards as one another, so that if you were going to somebody's computer to share, the environment would seem exactly the same. I think they're still in business, but that was a crazy bad idea because everybody works a little bit differently.
They've probably never been able to upgrade to newer technology.
I can't imagine what happened to them. But anyway, this is a project here, and this one happens to be a PHP project, but this could really be any technology. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit Open with Code, and that's going to open up Visual Studio Code, and I don't have PHP installed on this machine. So that's going to break a bunch of stuff inside of VS Code here. So we can see here that PHP executable was not found, and I need to install the PHP executable in my path. I don't particularly want to do that, but what I do have the option of here is the folder contains a dev container configuration file, and I can reopen Visual Studio Code using that container. So let's hit reopen container, and Visual Studio Code is going to restart here, and it's going to start setting up this container for me in the background. So this container is based on a Docker file that I have sitting in the root of my project directory. So let's open that up so we can get a look at that once this is finished loading. A few more seconds here. All right, cool. So that is up and running now. So now what this is doing is it's kind of split Visual Studio Code in two. So the front end is still running on my desktop computer, but all of the back end stuff, so saving files, opening files, all the kind of like logic for doing IntelliSense, all of that exists on the back end, which in this case happens to be running inside of a Docker container. So I have this Docker file here. Make that nice and big. And this is just going off and it's building the Docker container for me. So it's setting up some PHP, it's based on HTTP configuration, and does a bunch of stuff. So when I open this in a Docker container, it builds this Docker image for me. And then it installs a bunch of additional stuff in it that allows Visual Studio Code to run sort of on the back end, and I can connect to it from there. It also sets up my terminals here so that if I do a new terminal, this is actually a terminal on the remote machine. So I can go to the root directory here and I can run this like run HTTPD, and this is going to run the HTTP server inside of the container. And because I forwarded some ports from that, I'm able to connect to that with a web browser on my local machine. So this is a Docker file here that contains information about how to build a Docker container, but the real magic is in this dev container directory here. So I've gone and created this brand new dev container directory, and inside of here I have this JSON file called devcontainer.json. And I've set it up here so that I've called it portal, and the image that I'm using in the background is one called portal. And then I'm forwarding my local port 8080 to port 80 on the container so that I'm able to connect locally to port 8080 and get into the container. Then I've given it a small list of extensions. So because this is a container that gets rebuilt every time that I run it, it doesn't necessarily have the right Visual Studio code extensions in it that I want. So this is a list of 3 extensions that I find useful for working on this project that are going to be installed into the Visual Studio Code backend so that everybody gets the same experience. And then I'm going to run a post command here that's going to move some HTML stuff around. So what it's doing here is it's going to basically mount the local directory that I have inside of a Docker container so that any changes that I make inside of the Docker container are reflected back outside of it. So I can still use tools on my local machine. So they're still pointing at the kind of the same directory there. So this means that everybody who comes and opens this project in Visual Studio Code is going to be prompted to run it inside the container. The container is the same across everybody's workstation, so it provides kind of like a basic layer of compatibility so that everybody gets the same thing when they run it and when they develop on it. So if I hand this up to some other developer next week, they don't have to have PHP. They don't have to worry about which version of PHP they're running. They don't have to worry about which version of Apache they're running. So this allows a lot of easy development without a lot of setup. Now, I reached out to the Visual Studio Code team to ask about whether this was kind of like a thing that they had developed as a result of LiveShare. But I didn't hear back. But the technologies feel like they're really symmetrical to me.
Yeah, for sure. I really like this for especially like you said, you're working on a lot of different projects with different technologies, but even when you're working all within the same technology, often you have projects that are on different versions, and to kind of remove that whole, what version do I have installed on my machine is a big win.
Yeah. And the other really nice thing about this is that because I'm running on a remote machine, I can actually debug this code. So I can set breakpoints and I can run the PHP code, and I'll hit breakpoints and be able to poke variables and change them as need be. So it's super cool.
It doesn't actually feel like you're running remotely, right?
No. Like there's no latency or anything like that. It's just, it feels native.
That's cool. Awesome feature.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming out and watching another Asp.Net Monsters video. Remember to like, comment, share, and I feel like I need a 4th thing here. Donate huge sums of money to local animal shelters. Have your pets spayed and neutered.
There you go.
All right. I don't think anybody else has ever used that sign-off line. I think I'm safe.
It's definitely new. Yep.
All right. Well, we'll see everybody on the next episode.
See ya.
Bye.
So